Jim is a tenor banjoist. I don't say banjo player, I say banjoist because he's one of a very select few. He's a performer, a teacher, and is widely considered a master of this instrument. We're very pleased to be here today to talk about this wonderful American instrument with Jim. Now we're in Catonsville to film a basic tenor banjo video today, but we thought we'd take a few minutes before we start and for the Down Neck Gazette, get to know Jim, introduce him to our audience, our viewers, readers, if you will, and get a chance to plug this great American instrument. Jim has a book out. I've read it, thoroughly enjoyed it. I am a tenor banjo player, probably in the bottom 10% of the tenor banjo players in America, but I enjoy it a lot. And this book is phenomenal. If you are a basic player, if you know your chords and can play a little rhythm, and you want to move on, if you're blocked, if you have a blockage getting to the fancy picks, this is a great book. There's a lot of great anecdotes in here, visual stuff, just explanations of things that I've been wondering about for a long time. So thank you for writing this, and we'll talk about how to get a copy as we go along. So Jim, how long have you been playing the tenor, and what is a tenor banjo?
Well, I learned to play the tenor back in the 50s, and I was inspired by Arthur Godfrey because you may recall that he had a television show, and he would come out on stage and he would play the banjo. So,
I thought it was a ukulele.
Well, he played the ukulele,
okay.
But he played the banjo. Actually, the banjo was tuned like a guitar.
Okay.
But I just liked the way it was done, and also had a relative in my family who played banjo. My uncle, he played tenor banjo, and of course. I fell in love with the instrument when I heard my uncle play at parties around the house. And my older brother decided to buy me a banjo. So we went to a pawn shop and we got a banjo for the price of $29.
And what kind of banjo was it?
It was a K.
Okay. Yep.
And when I brought it home, I tuned it like a ukulele.
And it had the guitar-style tuners on it,
yes,
right?
It did, yes, it did. And I found I couldn't play it because the length of the neck didn't really hold that tuning too well. And I just couldn't make the chords sound the way Arthur Godfrey played them. And so I went to the local music store and I found the appropriate book with picture chords in it. And from that point on, I began to build my knowledge of what the banjo should sound like. And also in my neighborhood, I lived in East Baltimore, and East Baltimore was like a melting pot for all the European immigrants who came over. And a lot of them had parties, and they opened up saloons because they were Germans who came and they put into use
beer gardens.
That's
yeah,
right.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of those establishments had pianos where they entertained customers, usually on the weekends. They'd have a piano player in all these bars, and I could hear them playing the pianos as I passed by outside. And as I got older and became more proficient on the banjo, I was able to sit in with those groups. And back in those days, they played pop tunes that the kind of music that is identified with banjo today, but the kind of music that you don't hear anymore, yeah. Except when banjo players play them. And the more I was able to work with those kinds of individuals, the piano players, and they taught me the right harmony of the tunes, the more proficient I got.
You know, a lot of people, and I stress this so many times, and maybe you can agree or disagree with me, but once you learn the basics of an instrument, the way you develop is to get out and play. Find people.
Absolutely.
And sit.
Find the best musicians you can.
Yeah.
And once again, it's hard to do that nowadays because you don't find bars with piano players on them. You know, so you might find the karaoke, but that's about the extent of it. But you have to seek them out, find the best musicians, and learn from them. When I wrote the book Riley's Routines, I interviewed a lot of musicians that I was working with, and one of the things I asked them was, "What is it that you look for when you have a banjo player in the band?" And interestingly enough, they told me that what they want from a banjo player is to play the right rhythm and play the right chords. Now that's kind of simplistic, but it takes a lot of discipline in order to reach a level where you're able to integrate yourself into a band and keep the proper time and play the right chords.
Know your place. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, it's the same with a 5-string. We tell folks over and over, I want to learn. Root yourself in your chords and the basic rhythm of the style, and then you can go anywhere and play. But if you don't know that, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb. So, and this banjo, the tenor banjo, I'm an old mummer. I was a horn player first, saxophone. And then I went in as a tenor banjo player and was fortunate enough to go up the street 3 times with my son in the late 80s. And what a great thing that was. But the tenor banjo is not a instrument for someone who's introverted or afraid to stand out, is it? It has a lot of tone and a lot of volume. And a lot of the playing of it is controlling that power that's in that instrument. It's really wild.
It's a good instrument to use when you go to parties, because you can. It used to be advertisements that you'd find in newspapers for selling banjos that you could be the life of the party if you play the banjo.
Well, I can remember now. I'm talking maybe 60s or 70s. You're going to have to help me here. Where the pizza parlor craze, Shakey's and Your Father's Mustache. Was that the 70s?
I think it was the 60s.
Okay, and they had banjo bands, all these places.
Yeah, there was a fella up in the Northeast by the name of Schiavone, who started the pizza parlor craze. He was able. He loved the banjo, and he would gather instruments around him, the trombone, clarinet, trumpet. But he also featured the banjo. That was the main instrument, and they put sawdust and peanut shells,
garters on their
garters
things.
They wore the boaters, the straw hats, but the key ingredient to that was to get the audience to participate,
sing along.
So they had printed sheet music, and while the band would play certain numbers, the audience was encouraged to join in.
And that lasted for quite a few years, didn't it?
Yeah, and it really created a huge banjo boom, 4-string banjo boom. The 5-string was not popular at that particular time. But the 4-string became very popular, and manufacturers just couldn't keep up with the pace. They turned out banjos so much.
Well, my first 5-string was an old harmony, K, same type of banjo. So I know what you're saying, and an awful lot of people in this country learn to play the basics on a harmony, a K. And folks, if you got one in your closet, dust it off. Listen to Jim. And get his video. We'll talk about that at the end. Yeah, it's a great instrument. And the basics of it, it's not, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. It takes a little discipline and a little time. I was fortunate enough to have a few lessons with Edgar Stanistreet in Philadelphia before he died. And he goes back to World War I. He was a French resistance fighter in World War I and was still teaching banjo in the mid-80s in Philadelphia. And what an amazing little man he was, but just a master of the banjo. And I got some great ideas, but he was so far above me. I said, Mr. Stanistreet, I can't come down here every week. This isn't what I really want to do with it. But what he could make that thing talk.
Well, I should point out to you that not every 4-string banjo is a tenor. There actually is another banjo where the neck is longer, and that's the plectrum banjo. And there is a difference between the way that the banjos are played.
Let's get into that. Tell us how the two are tuned. And
this instrument, the tenor banjo, is tuned similarly to a violin or mandolin. In other words, it's tuned in fifths. Each starting with the low string. When you ascend up, each note is 5 notes higher than the next note. But the plectrum banjo is tuned. The 2 bass strings are tuned in fifths, but the 2 treble strings are tuned in thirds, and the result of that is that on the tenor banjo, the highest note is A, so it's a high note, therefore tenor, and on the plectrum, the highest note is D. The result is, because of the configuration of the chords, you get a much more mellower sound with the plectrum, whereas with the tenor, you get a much more brilliant sound. And the tenor was really a favorite instrument with jazz bands and with large groups. The plectrum banjo was a favorite with instrumentalists who wanted to play solos. Not to mean that you can't play solos on the tenor, but the person who wanted to learn the banjo gravitated toward the plectrum when they were solo oriented.
Okay.
And in vaudeville back in the teens and the 20s, you usually found plectrum players because they could do a lot of gymnastics on the instrument and bring the house down. Whereas with the tenor, you usually found them working in the orchestra pit because they were keeping time, they were playing the right chords, and they were giving impetus to the overall sound of the tune.
Now, somebody told me once, and I don't know how true it is, you can educate me here, that on a plectrum banjo, which is basically a 5-string with 4 strings on it, and instead of D, G, B, D, it's C, G, B, D, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the plectrum. But they told me that most of the melody on a plectrum is played on your first string. And on a tenor, it tends to be on the second string or the inside strings.
Well, the reason for that is because the tenor has a high string. Tunes are usually sung, so there's a range that where the notes, the low note to the high note is found in a tune. So consequently, when you play the tenor, you find yourself a lot of times playing on the inside strings, the strings 3 and 2. The notes go on the outside strings as well, but you have to learn. You have to, when you go to learn the tenor, you have to learn to go on the inside. Whereas on the plectrum, that high string is a D, and that is really places the range of the voice mostly on that outside string. You go on the inside occasionally, but for the most part, you're playing on the outside.
Yeah.
And the way the chords are configured on the tenor, you have to turn yourself around and use the fingers in a sort of pretzel shape a lot of times. But on the plectrum, the way that the chords are configured, the little finger often just stays on the outside almost all the time.
Okay.
So you're actually moving the fingers around on the inside 3 strings a lot.
But it still takes a lot of work.
Oh yeah, it takes a lot of practice.
And either instrument. Well, I've heard both Peabody and Reeser, who were probably the standards of the banjo world as far as plectrum and tenor. And some of the stuff those men did was truly amazing. The sounds they got out of those gut buckets.
They were really amazing musicians, and even today there are some musicians today who were of the equal as far as the skill is concerned to Peabody and Reeser. But back in the 20s, when they began to emerge in show business, they just astounded the world at the way that they could play and the way the banjo sounded under their fingers.
So which came first, plectrum or tenor? Which was first?
Well,
on the scene?
the first banjo, of course, was the 5-string.
Yes.
And as the years advanced, the banjo underwent many changes. Originally, it didn't have any frets. So around 1875 or thereabouts, they began to put frets on the instrument, and they only went up so far. And then, as years went by, there were other innovations that took place. And the banjo manufacturers wanted to reach a wide audience of players. So they began to improve the instrument, and they also began to experiment with tunings. So eventually, they produced banjos that guitar players could play, and then they wanted to reach the audience of mandolin and violin players, and so they experimented some more, and they came up with the tenor banjo. Well, we're not really sure whether that came ahead of the plectrum or not. Because in essence, if you simply take the 5th string off of the 5-string, you have a plectrum banjo. So it's likely that somebody actually was playing with the plectrum, which is another word for pick. They played the plectrum right after they learned to play the 5-string. But there was a banjo manufacturer, I think his name was Shaw, back in the Schall, I think it is, back in the teens. 1907, I believe, is the earliest reference to the tenor banjo, and even then it was called a tango banjo. It was called that because they wanted to cash in on a new dance craze that had swept the nation at that time, the tango. But eventually the dance craze passed, and so rather than keep that name, somebody said, well, let's call it the tenor because of that high-pitched top string. So around 1907, the tenor came along.
Well, it's a wonderful world of different sounds and pitches and strings, but it's all a drum head with a skin on it.
Musical drum.
And and the sounds that come out of it. What I'd like you to do, and you've been playing since the 50s, right? Mm-hmm. And I know you've played professionally, you've taught, you're still considered to be an outstanding teacher, I know that. And could you give us a little demonstration of how this instrument sounds in different forms, say a rhythm, a little bit of melody? What could somebody expect on a journey of learning this instrument? You can go from here to there to there.
A beginner, of course, would have to learn how to play chords, and of course the chords are strummed. And of course you change chords.
And you can hear that high first string in there.
Right. And then, of course, you learn inversions. And of course, my right hand is simply playing downstrokes. as you gain efficiency, then you put in other strokes, an upstroke. And then, of course, you learn how to pick. And then you learn some syncopated rhythms, such as. And then, of course, you learn the drum routines. Now, the drum routine would be a Radamacue. You hear the drum doing that. And the triplet.
Right hands is very important, isn't it?
Yeah, especially because you want to get that syncopated sound.
Yeah, yeah. So you can hear that high A string ringing there. I know the biggest enlightenment to me, I was playing a tenor. I had a Bacon and Day at the time, was a silver bell. And Patrick was playing his guitar and his 5-string. And we'd play songs like The Wreck of the Old 97 and stuff like that. And the only chords I knew, I bought a book, and it was the open chords up near the nut. The G, the C, the D, and up there. And with the open strings, it has a nice sound, but it's not a tight sound, I guess is the right word. And I was watching a guy at a folk festival, and he borrowed my banjo, said, "Can I see that?" And he's playing, and I'm hearing this sound that I can't do that. What's he doing? And he just smiled. He said, "Chord inversions. Keep working. You'll figure it out." And that started me trying to find what's he talking about, inversions and different. And then you find out that you can go to any spot on the neck and get different sounds with the same chords, depending on how you use them. So that's the real joy of learning an instrument, I think. Getting inspired and seeking this sound that you hear people doing. So where are you headed with the banjo now? I know you're a founding member of the Bayside Banjo Aggregation, which is I guess a confederation of banjoists from the general Baltimore area. Great group. We went to a few of their meetings several years ago. We've been to Allenbury to the massacre on St. Valentine's Day several years ago. And it's a great bunch of guys. Where is the banjo headed? Where do you see it going? And is there still interest in it, or does interest have to be generated?
Well, the banjo, the 4-string banjo is not well these days. It needs a shot in the arm, as the 5-string got when the movie Deliverance caused a huge attention on the 5-string banjo. So it needs something like that. At the present time, however, those of us who play the banjo are aging, and there needs to be more people coming in to perpetuate the music, and we see some evidence of that, but there's not enough to satisfy us old-timers who really want to put banjos in the hands of all the kids nowadays.
Yes.
So something needs to be done in order to create that interest.
Well, kids, let me tell you something. It's a great instrument. Takes a little discipline, but no more than a guitar or a mandolin or a violin.
Every musical instrument.
Yes. And it's a great sounding instrument. It's a lot of fun. And like I say, we're here today to film with Jim a basic tenor banjo lesson. And it's well worth looking into. If after you hear him play a little bit, we're gonna convince you to play a song or two before we move on. And go to funkyseagull.com and pick up Basic Tenor Banjo with Jim Riley. And you won't regret it, because I've heard Jim play, met him several years ago, and very, very, very happy to be here today with somebody of this caliber doing a lesson for us. It's a lot of fun. There's banjos all over the place. You can still find little open backs, 17 fret. That's all you need. Most tenors have 19. Some have 20. 17 is perfectly acceptable, and they're great for learning. They're easy to carry around. You can pick them up still for $50 at a flea market, and they don't need much work to make them playable. So experiment. You might have one in your closet. Maybe your dad's got one left over from the 60s, hanging around somewhere. But pick it up and try it. Listen to the bright sound. It's a happy sound when it's played right. What I'm going to do is get out of the way, Jim, and just ask you to go through a tune or two. And then we'll just say goodbye to the folks, and We got a lot of work to do today yet,
Mhm.
but we did want to introduce you to the folks who look at the Gazette and maybe do a little good for the tenor banjo.
Mhm.
It's a great instrument. It
Yeah.
truly is an all-American
Oh, it's a
instrument.
wonderful instrument. This is a tune that all banjo players must learn. It's a tune called Bye Bye Blues. Now here's an old tune that was written around 1927. It's one of those vintage banjo tunes that were written expressly for the tenor banjo. It's called Banjo Mania.
Let me tell you something. If I didn't already own 3 or 4 tenor banjos, I'd go out today and buy one. Thank you, Jim. That was great.
Great.
Go find a tenor banjo, folks. Start playing it. It's a great instrument.